The wedding of Colton Harrow, only son of one of Chicago's most powerful financial dynasties, unfolded in silence beneath a curtain of fog rolling through Aspen's icy valleys. Guests shifted in their seats, whispering under their breath, trying to catch a glimpse through the veil. But no one could see the bride's face, not even the groom. The event had been rushed, shrouded in secrecy, and arranged with diplomatic urgency. Colton's father had made it clear: marry the daughter of their royal Middle Eastern investors, or watch the Harrow empire crumble under debt. Colton had never met her. Not once, not even a photograph that wasn't carefully chosen, heavily filtered, and scrubbed of identifiers. This wasn't love, it was leverage. As the music echoed through the grand hall built into the side of the snowy mountain, Colton stood stiff, robotic, his breath sharp like glass. The guests rose. The bride appeared at the far end of the aisle, cloaked in lace and flowing ivory. Not a word, not a tremble. Her steps, firm, purposeful. Colton didn't blink. She reached the altar. The veil was lifted, and standing before him was not a woman. It was a man, but not just any man. That jawline, those eyes, the way the corners of his mouth trembled ever so slightly when overwhelmed, it took Colton's breath away. It was Rowan Vale, his first love, his only love. The boy who vanished from his life 2 decades ago. The boy he last saw with trembling hands in the shadows of a high school gym equipment room, pressed against him in a stolen kiss. Colton's legs nearly buckled. He felt the blood drain from his face, but he didn't speak. Couldn't. He heard the distant clicks of cameras, the gap, the confused glances between shareholders and foreign dignitaries. But all he could see was Rowan, alive, here, in front of him. Wearing the veil meant to trap them both, because the truth wasn't just that the person under the veil was a man. It was that this man had been buried by his family, his identity stripped, his very existence erased. And now he had returned, not in silence, but in defiance. Colton's father stood motionless at the front row, his face frozen in cold fury. The priest stammered. A murmur swept the room like wildfire. But Colton's hand, shaking, reached out. Not for the ring, not for the bouquet. For Rowan's hand. Rowan didn't flinch. They stood like that, silent, statuesque, impossible to ignore. The ceremony didn't continue. There was no "I do wish you," but something had already been spoken. Something irreversible. Something stronger than any vow written on corporate paper. The veil had been lifted, and the past had returned, dressed in truth. You won't believe the reason Rowan came back. Don't miss what happens next, only on Hard Stories. Before he was erased, before the veil and the wedding and the cameras, Rowan Vale had been 17 and alive in the truest sense. Back then, he walked the crowded halls of Springbrook High with quiet confidence, in a secret he only shared with one person: Colton Harrow. Colton, star athlete, son of a tycoon, poster boy for everything a Harrow was expected to be. But when the school lights dimmed and the locker rooms emptied, he'd find Rowan waiting behind the old gymnasium, eyes soft, hands trembling, voice low. It wasn't just infatuation, it was escape. For both of them. Until the night everything shattered. It was a Friday. The gym had been locked for hours. Rowan and Colton were careless, caught in a kiss between stacks of unused mats. A flashlight beam, heavy footsteps, then silence. The next morning, Rowan was gone. The school announced he had been selected for a cultural exchange program, an exclusive opportunity for promising students to study abroad. But no one ever said where. His locker was emptied by noon. His name vanished from the roll call. By Monday, the truth was uglier. Colton's father had moved quickly to protect the Harrow name, to erase scandal before it could bloom. He arranged for Rowan to be shipped away under a false identity through a covert educational rehabilitation program. These weren't schools. They were silent institutions scattered across foreign soil places where American families sent their children when they wanted them rebranded, rewritten, or simply removed. Rowan found himself in a desert city he couldn't pronounce, in a dormitory surrounded by steel gates and barbed philosophies. He was assigned a new name. His real one was forbidden. He wasn't allowed to write home freely. Every letter passed through hands trained to censor. His questions were ignored. His past was treated as fiction, and the boy he had loved, Colton, was sealed behind a wall of silence. He tried at first, letters, prayers, even whispers into the wind, but nothing came back. Not one reply. It took months to understand he hadn't just been sent away. He had been deleted. And so, he adapted. He stopped asking. He stopped hoping. He listened, watched, and waited. Every month, new students arrived, boys and girls, whose only crimes were being different. Some lasted weeks. Some tried to run. One jumped from the second floor. Another stopped speaking entirely. Rowan endured. Over time, he learned how the system worked, who funded the schools, who profited from the silence, which families signed contracts to ensure their children would never return unchanged. And at the very top, connected through shell companies and diplomatic networks, sat the Harrow family. Colton's father hadn't just cast him out. He had fed him into a machine built to erase lives for profit. But the fire in Rowan never fully went out. He learned languages, earned credentials, waited for moments when guards got lazy or systems failed, and after nearly a decade, he walked out. Not as the same boy who'd left, but as a man who knew exactly what had been taken and from whom. He returned to the States quietly, reclaimed his legal name through court battles and backdoor filings. And once the documents arrived, cold and clean in the mail, he held them for a long time, just staring at the ink. Rowan Vale. He was real again, but before he could reclaim his life, he needed one thing more to understand what had happened to Colton. Had he known? Had he fought? Had he moved on? Rowan dug deep, traced names, found old contacts. He stayed hidden in the shadows, watching the Harrow family rise higher than ever and then begin to crack under financial strain. That was when he saw his chance. The Middle Eastern investment deal, the arranged marriage to a supposed royal daughter, the rumors of desperation behind polished smiles. Rowan didn't hesitate. He stepped into the role designed to cage him. He would return through the very stage built to display his erasure, not as a ghost, but as the storm. Rowan Vale didn't just walk back into Colton's life. He returned by stepping through a doorway built on desperation shared, silent, and unexpected. It happened months before the wedding, at a private gallery event in Geneva hosted by a Gulf royal patron. Rowan wasn't meant to be there. He had been working as a translator's aide, using a false name, keeping his profile low as he quietly pieced his life back together. And that's when he saw her, Amal bint Rashid Al Nayel, the princess soon to be married into the Harrow family. She was standing alone in front of a sculpture of a shattered mirror. Their eyes met. Something cracked open. She didn't want to marry. He didn't want to disappear again. They met again. In secret, Amal told him everything, how her family had arranged the marriage to expand their financial reach, how her voice was lost in layers of protocol, tradition, and male signatures. She was to be flown to Aspen under surveillance, married to a man she had never spoken to, then flown back as a symbolic bond between two empires. She had no say. She had no choice, but she had resources. And Rowan had a reason. He told her his story. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to show her he wasn't just running from something, but towards something, towards someone. A pact was born not out of romance, but out of survival. Amal agreed to vanish quietly. In return, Rowan would take her place, a body under a veil, a name that no one could publicly verify. The Harrow patriarch had insisted on secrecy, on tight media control, on keeping the bride's identity vague to avoid political scrutiny. They didn't want questions. They wanted images, optics. A headline, they got it. Amal disappeared into the quiet anonymity she longed for, sheltered by offshore contacts and female relatives outside the spotlight. Rowan stepped into the silhouette she left behind, cloaked in fabric, wrapped in tradition, silenced by design. He played the part perfectly, never speaking, never removing the veil, and no one questioned it, because no one wanted to. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Rowan had already begun gathering the files, the internal reports, the forgotten students, the offshore contracts that linked the Harrow family to a hidden global web of correctional education programs. He tracked down survivors like himself, people who'd been erased under the banner of discipline and moral rehabilitation. Some had changed names, others had scars deeper than memory. He built a dossier, and at the center of it all was one named Lawrence Harrow, the man who had orchestrated his exile, the man who would now walk his son down the aisle toward the very person he tried to destroy. Rowan didn't return to start over. He returned to finish what was buried. And Colton was about to face a truth he never asked for, from a man he thought the world had swallowed whole. The ballroom shimmered in gold that evening, polished crystal, tailored tuxedos, international press. Every detail of the Harrow-Rashid Alliance press event had been choreographed to project power. Global financial analysts lined the velvet aisles, waiting for Colton Harrow to take the stage, standing beside his royal bride and formally bind the Harrow name to Middle Eastern wealth. But the Harrows had planned for an illusion, and Colton was about to show them reality. When the music cued and cameras turned, Colton walked out alone. No bride beside him, no handshake, no rehearsed smile, just a man, stiff in posture, eyes unwavering, and beside him, a second man stepped into the light. Rowan Vale, not veiled, not disguised, wearing a white suit, understated yet undeniable. The moment froze, a breathless silence. Then shutters clicked like thunder, murmurs spread like wildfire, but neither of them flinched. Colton stepped up to the podium. He didn't read the speech prepared for him, and he didn't mention investment strategies or global partnerships. He placed a small, aged envelope on the podium. The corners were frayed, the handwriting faded. He held it carefully, like something sacred. "This letter," Colton said, voice tight, "was written to me when I was 17. It never reached me. I only found it 2 weeks ago. It was written by someone I thought I'd lost forever, someone I was told had chosen to disappear." He opened the envelope slowly, drawing out a sheet of paper folded in thirds. The room was silent. "I don't know if this will ever reach you, Colton. I don't know if you even asked about me, but I need to say it. You were not a mistake. That night was not shame. If they erase me, remember me laughing. Remember the boy who only felt whole with you. If they let you forget, then I forgive you. But I will not forget." Colton's voice cracked on the last sentence, then silence again. The crowd didn't understand yet, but the man sitting in the front row did. Lawrence Harrow rose from his seat, face flushed, voice cutting like a blade. "This is a lie. That boy is a fraud. This entire performance is..." But Colton didn't yield. He turned, calmly. "Is it a lie that Rowan was sent away in the dead of night? Is it a lie that you erased a list of students for profit, that you struck deals with overseas reconditioning camps to silence queer and neurodivergent teens under the guise of education? No court found wrongdoing because no court was allowed to see it." The words rang out like thunder. Behind the cameras, a few heads turned, a few phones began live streaming. Rowan stood still, jaw clenched, refusing to meet Lawrence's eyes. Colton took a breath. "Steady now. I won't marry into blood money. I won't inherit an empire built on the exile of truth." Gasps. A wave of movement as executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The press began typing faster. Lawrence tried again, raising his voice, but now his words landed weaker, desperate. The illusion was cracking, and this time no amount of status could patch the fracture. Colton stepped down from the podium. He didn't wait for applause. He didn't need it. Rowan followed, quiet, dignified, expression unreadable. They walked out together, not as heirs, but as witnesses. Outside, the air was colder than expected. Lights flickered through the trees, and the road ahead shimmered faintly with frost. They didn't speak right away. There were no fireworks, no triumphant music, just the hush that follows when something once locked away has finally been named aloud. That night, headlines exploded. Heir denounces empire at wedding event. Veil lifted on secret exile program tied to U.S. tycoon. Who is Rowan Vale? And while the media churned, while the legal team scrambled, Rowan and Colton drove in silence through the mountain roads, the fog returning, soft and spectral, like a memory reborn. For the first time in years, Rowan rolled down the window, let the wind touch his face. He didn't look back, and neither did Colton. The second wedding was not announced. There were no reporters, no floral archways trimmed in imported gold, no fog machines, only a small garden behind a quiet chapel just outside Boulder, where the wind moved through wild grass like breath. This time, there were no illusions to protect, no reputations to uphold, only truth. Rowan Vale wore a black suit, pressed but simple, the same one he had worn to the court hearing where he officially reclaimed his name. Colton Harrow stood beside him, no longer the heir of a dynasty, but a man who had walked away from inheritance to preserve something rarer, dignity. There were fewer than 20 guests. Most of them had once been children sent away like Rowan, survivors of silence. Some still bore the weight in their posture, in the way they avoided mirrors. Others came with partners, lovers, or siblings who had never stopped searching. One woman brought a photograph of her brother. He had died in treatment. She held it against her chest as Rowan lit a single candle in his memory. They exchanged vows written in plain language. No metaphor, no poetry, just truths. How Rowan had imagined this day 1,000 times while locked behind foreign gates. How Colton had spent years trying to forget a boy whose absence never stopped burning in his ribs. There were no wedding rings. Instead, they exchanged small silver pin symbols of the new foundation they had launched just weeks before unveiled. Not a charity, a reckoning. The foundation's mission was clear expose and dismantle the network of rehabilitation schools that had for decades preyed on American teenagers deemed inconvenient by their families, especially LGBTQ+ youth. It would offer legal counsel, shelter, education, and most of all, the platform to tell the stories that had been buried. Rowan took the lead, his face now known, his voice no longer trembling. He began recording personal testimonies, sometimes sitting across from survivors who couldn't speak without shaking. He sat with them, he waited, and when they spoke, he listened. The first short documentary went viral within days. Its title, The Groom Under the Veil, was me. Colton, meanwhile, used what remained of his contacts not to salvage the Harrow empire, but to dismantle its reach. He sold off his stake, donated half to Unveiled. The rest, he redirected into a scholarship fund named after the boy his father had erased. Not Rowan, the boy he used to be, before the world tried to rewrite him. Rowan never wanted revenge. What he wanted was daylight, the kind that touched every hidden corner and said you exist, and you deserve to stay. They lived in a modest house not far from the Colorado foothills, surrounded by rescued dogs and late-night takeout. Their life wasn't perfect. Sometimes they argued about small things. Colton left lights on. Rowan hated loud chewing, but when they lay in bed at night, it was always with their hands intertwined, always with breath steady, and no secrets. The final blow came when federal investigations, prompted by the Foundation's work, uncovered a chain of payments linked directly to the Harrow corporate accounts. Lawrence Harrow was called to testify. He refused. His health declined, but the silence around him began to rot. Former partners turned away, boards dissolved, and for the first time, survivors were believed not as anomalies, but as witnesses. Rowan never saw him again. He didn't need to, because the real victory wasn't Lawrence's fall. It was standing in the sunlight without flinching. One day, while filming a new testimony, a boy no older than 17 asked Rowan, "How did you know you were strong enough to come back?" Rowan paused, then said, "I didn't. I just came back anyway." The boy nodded and for the first time smiled. Their wedding photo hangs in the Unveiled office. Not framed in gold, but clipped to a corkboard with a note beside it. Nothing worth loving should be hidden. And maybe that's the only vow that mattered. How many people around us are still living behind a veil? And if yours was lifted today, would you dare be seen? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow Heart Stories for more stories that speak truth where others whisper.